a 1, a 2, an uno, dos, tres, chicken. What?
When the
That was-
kids
I think it's dose.
I messed up. I know it's dose. I said dace instead of
It's
tray.
rooster, not chicken. Come on,
Sing it, Toots.
get with it.
Here we go.
Why
When the kids go to sleep.
do I feel like I'm echoing?
Welcome to our live studio audience. Thanks for coming in today. You all get a free Volkswagen. Brought to you by our
What?
sponsors at VW. What? I wish.
I know. When did this happen?
If you've ever been in
In
a
our dreams.
VW Bug, they smell like crayons.
They do?
Yeah, they have like, you guys, some of you know, if you've ever been in a VW, they have this
All of
very
them?
unique.
New
Yeah,
and old? What
well,
if it's just new? It's
why are
probably
you
the
raising
new
so
car.
many questions? Just
Probably the
take my
new
word
car
for
smell.
it. No, they really do. They smell like crayons.
But you said
Crowns.
it right. Crayons.
I know. I don't. I'm sick of your
Shay
abuse.
usually says crowns.
I say crowns.
It's crayons.
She's like, it's crayons. Yeah, she's so nagging me all the time. Welcome to the podcast. Today is episode number 71.
Yes.
71, 71, 71. All right, today's theme is awkward parent talks.
But the news for the day is Shay's running a marathon tomorrow.
Boom, check
Can you
it
believe
out.
it? It's already here. Are you ready?
I'm dreading it.
You're ready.
It's painful. It's
is painful.
3.5 hours of hurt.
Yep.
But I'm ready.
But you're going
I'm
to do
ready.
it.
I've
And
been
you're gonna
drinking my
love it.
juice.
And when you're done, you're going to be like, oh, next time I'm going to do this and that. You know.
I'm done. I'm done setting goals. I'm just gonna take it easy. I'm gonna see how long I can lay on the couch at one time.
That's a hard goal, honey. I think it's attainable, though. You can do it.
Okay, so I'm running the St. George Marathon tomorrow, and my goal was, if you're following along for Shea Timber, to be able to qualify for the Boston Marathon, which means I would need to run that 26.2 miles in 3 hours and 5 minutes. We don't know if that's going to happen or not. I'll be honest with you.
Do it.
I really feel confident in getting a 3 hour and 30-minute time because of my pacing for the long runs that I've been going on. I'm pretty sure I can hit it in 3 hours and 30 minutes, which isn't bad, honestly. That is a good marathon time, and I will feel very satisfied if I can do it in 3 hours and 30 minutes. If I have just I don't know, because you never know what happens on race day. You get there's definitely an added level of adrenaline that happens on race day.
You need a good playlist.
I do. I need to get
your playlist
I
together.
need to get that together because if you do have that those crazy days, and I know athletes sometimes they do amazing things that they never thought they could do or even did in training. A lot of world records are broken during the Olympics where they'd never done that before in training. So it could happen. I mean, who knows? I could pull it out of my butt somehow and qualify for Boston. But if I did, man, I'd be really surprised.
Just remember the Scout motto.
Be prepared.
Do your best.
That's not the Scout
It's
motto.
the Cub Scout motto.
Well, I'm
Boy
a
Scouts
Boy
is different
Scout.
than Cub Scouts.
Cub Scouts are losers. I'm a
yeah.
man Scout. So, I'm excited if you're in St. George. I was thinking that I've never had during a marathon is watermelon slices along the path.
Oh.
I would really, if you're in the St. George area and you want to have a nice little succulent treat for me, have a nice cold watermelon slice that I can bite into as I run by.
That sounds awesome.
Because I've never had that before. And that seems, because it's very watery, but it gives the sugar to your brain that you need to stimulate your brain. I remember in the LA Marathon, I was eating Jolly Ranchers.
Yeah,
It really
and
helped.
you had these jelly beans that you talked about. Were
I had
awesome.
these jelly beans that I ate that really helped me out. Anyways, okay, so that'll be that, and that'll be that, and yeah, it'll be great, and it'll be
and
painful.
that transitions us into
Sex.
awkward parent talks, which would include
The birds and the bees.
the birds and the bees.
So me and Colette were talking, and we never got this talk from our parents.
Yeah, I don't remember having it until the night before I got married. And my mom sat me down. So, I'm like, yeah, it's kind of late for this talk.
Here's the penis. So listen, let's just say this right at the top of the podcast. This is going to be an adult-themed podcast. So if there are small children around, you might want to duct tape them to their beds and leave them out of the room. Because we're going to be talking about the birds and the bees,
Yes.
Santa Claus, and explaining death to kids. So it might be a little more adult-themed podcast.
Because Santa Claus is an adult topic.
Anyways, okay, so yeah, we never, I honestly never had that talk. I remember in 6th grade, our school had like boys are going to grow hair in their pubic areas. And we had that talk.
Pubic area?
Right. And they got all of the 6th grade boys together, and it was like the health teacher was giving us, the your body's changing kind of talk. And we were just immature. I remember everybody was making jokes and laughing and giggling.
Especially when you're with your friends.
Right.
Like, that's not really
and the teacher got
learning
mad
time.
And was like, you guys need to grow up, and we are canceling this talk. And she canceled it and said, the only way we're going to have this is if your parents come. So then we had to reschedule it, and our moms or dads had to come with us to this talk. And they had it like this. I remember it was like this special after school because we got in big trouble because we were making way too light of it. And our parents had to show up. And I remember it was like so awkward showing up with my mom and like, we're going to talk about my penis. This is weird. What was that noise?
Oh my goodness.
And it was,
I think there's a debate. Like, some people don't think it's okay to talk about that stuff at a school.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
We were talking about this in the Mom's View a little bit.
I would say that it's definitely the parents' job. I don't want anybody else teaching my kids that.
Right.
And like Colette said,
which they will. I mean,
oh, they'll hear about it, So, who will explain it, mom or dad? I think
we need to do it together.
Yeah, I think with the boys, it'll kind of like I'll teach the boys and you'll teach the girls.
And then we'll do.
Because Colette, she's like, I don't want to talk about that.
Well,
me and Suntard, we can
I can talk about it.
Well, we did. Me and Suntard actually had to talk about it this weekend. I don't know what brought it up.
But it wasn't like a planned thing. It was like a spontaneous.
Oh, right. Yeah. This is what he asked me. He said, Dad, will you and Mom ever get a divorce?
Oh.
And it was like he said it in the sweetest little voice, and me and him were in my truck together driving. And I was like, no. I said, no, we'd never get a divorce. I said, by the way, your mom wouldn't let me divorce her. Because he was talking. We were talking about this kid that goes to a school that is kind of like a troubled kid. And I was asking him, so why do you think he acts that way? And he's like, I think it's just because he doesn't see his mom and dad very much because his mom and dad are divorced. And he talked about how a lot of his friends, or most of his friends at school, his parents are divorced. Their parents are divorced. And so that got us into like the sex talk. And I asked him, I said, so
how did that get you into the sex talk?
I don't know. What was it?
I'm looking for the transition.
I don't know. I just like talking about sex. I can't remember what it was. Somehow it came up where I was like, I think I asked him because like, me and Colette have been talking about recently, like we need to have that talk with Suntard.
Is it time? Is it getting close to time?
And so I think that came to my mind as we were talking about, moms and dads and divorce and stuff like that. And I think I kind of thought like, oh, maybe this is a good time. But I wanted to gauge how much he knew about it. You know what I mean? Because I don't want to come right out and say, okay, listen, bro, here's a diagram. Here's what happens. But I just wanted to see how much he knew about it. So I asked him, I said, so what do the kids at school talk about sex? Like, do they say anything about it? And he was like, yes. And you could tell that like he had heard some stuff at school. And I also had the talk with them the other day with Suntard, Princess Tard, and Baby Tard, because we just heard this story about some teacher molesting kids. And so I sat down with them when I picked them up from school. We were sitting on the bench, and I said, listen, you guys, a grown-up should never touch you. I said, where are your private areas? Do you know where your private areas are? And they're like, yeah. The girls are like, my pee, and then they point down there. And I said, there should never be an adult that ever touches you there, or you should never touch an adult there, ever, unless it's a doctor or if it's your mom and dad, changing a diaper or something like that. And we had that discussion. And I told them, I said, me and Mom just heard the story about a teacher in another part of the country who was like, touching little kids down there. And they were like, really? And they were all like shocked and stuff. So I had that conversation with them. I said, you can always tell me and your mom if that ever happens. Don't ever be afraid. You will never be in trouble with us, but you have to tell us. Like, you always have to tell us. Anyways, I don't know how this conversation with me and Suntard happened, but I basically found out that some of the kids at his school had been like talking about sex and stuff. And so this is another reason. The other day, Colette sent me a hay tale that she was coming back from a shoot, and she's like, okay, babe, I'll be there in a minute. And she's like, I miss you. We need some time to ourselves. Let's just lay down on top of each other naked. And she was just like joking around in this hotel.
I was trying to shock him because I like doing that.
Plus, she wanted to have sex with me.
Okay.
And Suntard heard it because it was in the room. And she said, I want to lay on
And
top
of
of you
course.
naked. And the
course,
phone was
this
just
has
laying
to happen to
on the bed, and it like is played, and Suntard's listening.
And you're probably like, oh.
And I was
crap.
I think I was in the bathroom actually, and he's in there like, hey, Dad, Mom sent you a hey tell. I'm like, listen to it, and then he hears that, and right as she started saying that, I'm
Note
like,
to
oh
self.
crap! So I go running in there, and he just like hands me the phone, and his eyes are like this big, and I was like, well, I just started cracking up, and I sent her a message back. I'm like, well, your son just heard that.
And I said, well, at least he knows we love each other.
So so he kind of like these little things have been popping up, and I thought, he probably needs to have this conversation. So I think that's probably why I brought it up. Anyways, I said, well, me and your mom have sex, and he's like, and then he said, yeah, like you guys do if you want to have another baby. And I said, no, actually we have sex just because it's fun and it feels good and we enjoy it. And he acted like,
What?
whoa, like I just thought that was for baby making. And I said,
It is. Just tell him that.
and I said, no, because sex, with kids this age, it seems like it's a bad thing because, every time it comes on the TV or you see a billboard with a half naked lady, we're always like covering their eyes or changing the channel. So it almost seems like they don't know if it, there's this, I think this opportunity, you know what I'm saying? It seems like it's a bad thing.
There's an opportunity to teach them why it's important and that it is a good thing, but the wisdom in staying away from it. Now,
So, because of our belief, a lot of our beliefs and the way that we raise our children are based off of our belief in a heavenly Father, in a supreme being, in this fact that we live after this life. And so in teaching our kids about these, topics in life, we always relate it to that. And so I told him, I said, sex isn't a bad thing. Sex has actually been given to us from God. It's a blessing. Sex is a blessing from our Heavenly Father. And I told him this. I said, but it's very important that it's only within the bonds of marriage. You have to find that special somebody that, what we believe is eternal companions. We believe that when we're married, we're sealed for all time and eternity and not until death do you part. We believe that the relationship that we have formed and established here on the earth will continue forever. And that, that sex act is a way to, bring us together emotionally and spiritually. And
yeah, it's a bonding thing. It's not for fun all the time. It's been given to us as a gift for each other, but not for just whenever.
And I tried to explain it to him that it's a very sacred thing, that it's not something that, and I told him, I said, you might hear a lot of kids at school talking about like, oh yeah, like you have sex with like all these different people. And I explained to him, I said, sex is good if it's done in the right way with the right person. And we had that talk. And I think he understood. Like he seemed like excited about that.
Yeah. So he doesn't know all the details yet, but.
Yeah. So like I haven't had the conversation of like, this is what happens.
And what do you guys think? What do you think? How old should a child be when you introduce that topic?
I think it's different for different children.
I kind of think that it should be around, between that 8 to 11 age, because they're still young enough that they trust you and they respect your opinion, and they need to know, because by then they're going to hear it from everywhere else.
I think,
and they're going to be too cool to talk to mom and dad.
It's happening sooner and sooner in our society.
Yes.
Because I even, just when I was a kid, I'm not that old, I'm 32 years old, but I didn't really get into that, those thoughts until 7th or 8th grade, I feel like. You know what I mean? I had no idea. I remember, this is a little crude, I remember as like...
Don't tell me what.
As like a fifth grader or 6th grader, like being in the bathtub and getting an erection and being like...
I don't want to know.
And being like, this will be so embarrassing once I get married if my wife sees that. And I remember feeling like, what am I going to do when I get married? I that specific thought came to my mind that like, this will be so embarrassing.
Poor Blake back there.
I remember thinking like, this will be so embarrassing when my wife sees this when I get older.
Seriously, that is so embarrassing, Shay.
So it just differs with the, specifically for each child and their maturity level.
Right.
And I think that it's becoming more and more into our society, like we're, just over time, TV shows back in the day, they couldn't even show a man and a wife in the same bed together. They were in separate beds. And now you have TV shows where they're just like, they're not showing the whole sex.
Just rolling over after or something.
But it's like, the more time goes on, the more and more prevalent it gets in our world, in our society.
So you do have to explain more earlier.
Right, because the questions are raised sooner. They see it on billboards, like just some of these Victoria's Secret commercials and stuff. It's like, that chick is naked, she's like barely, covering
I think
anything.
it's interesting too because how do you gauge on, okay, well, if I tell them early, then is that just going to spark their curiosity about it, or is that going to give them more knowledge so they're more informed and they can make better decisions? I don't know. It's kind of one of those things. You have to decide for your own child and for your own, how you feel about it. And don't be afraid of it either. I think that a lot of parents do that where it's like, oh, I don't want to talk about that. Right. It's super embarrassing.
I think it's good to talk about it. I told Suntard, I said, dude, if you ever have any questions, I said, don't listen to the kids at school. Come ask me. Like, I'm your dad. I'm the one that's supposed to be helping you understand these things. I said, you're never going to get in trouble with me. Like, I made him understand that, like, sex is not a bad thing if it's done in the right way. And if you ever have any questions about it, just come and ask us. I tried to let him know, like, this is like, dude, you can tell me, you can talk to me about anything. And I think that's what's important, is that kids need to know that they're not going to be in trouble and that it's something that they can ask questions about, and they're not going to get in trouble for asking specific questions.
And that you'll tell them the truth.
Yeah, I said, dude, whatever it is, I told him, and I always tell him that, I said, dude, if you have any questions about anything, just ask me and I will be honest with you. I won't hide anything from you. I won't try to like keep anything from you. I will tell you the truth about anything. And he seemed like, okay, like I'm cool with that.
I think that's hard too, because parents don't, sometimes it's like, oh, well, the stork comes and brings the baby. It's like,
you can't be afraid of it.
Just tell them like it is.
And, we have another sex podcast where we talk about this because, sex is great. I love sex, right? Who doesn't? But if you're not careful with it, if you don't keep it in the bounds of marriage, I mean, it can lead to a lot of sorrow and a lot of heartache and diseases and pregnancies that you didn't want. You know what I mean? Like, a lot of stuff bad can happen from sex if you don't treat it right. It's a very powerful thing.
But we definitely go into more detail on that podcast. So we'll leave a link in the description.
Leave a link below.
But speaking of hiding things from your kids,
when do you tell the kids about this? Is when you might want to. We're going to talk about Santa Claus.
What do you learn about Santa Claus?
Colette didn't want to talk about
and the Tooth Fairy and stuff. Because
Brett, you say it out loud. I can't say it.
As your Jewish producer, Santa Claus does not exist.
No!
I apologize, everyone.
As your Jewish producer.
You Jews ruin everything.
We love you, Brett.
As your gay Jewish producer.
We're having the gay talk on our podcast.
I said we need to get Brett and Michael Buckley and Will of DC, and we'll have a big gay discussion podcast.
Yes.
And then I won't tell them what else.
But I don't know if this will pertain, because is Santa Claus gay? Is that what?
What?
I don't know what's going on.
First, he doesn't. Okay, so Santa Claus. When's the first time?
So how do you tell?
It's hard to even say for me. Like, it's hard to even say, like, because you keep this secret.
I think this is a really interesting topic, because I think it raises the question. Well, if I can come to you and ask you anything, you better tell me the truth. So
right.
Is Santa Claus
if
real?
He asked me, I would tell
him
no. If he came and asked me,
if he came and asked you.
But see, Colette doesn't. She wants to keep that mystery alive.
I loved it as a kid. I never felt like, once I figured it out, that it was like, oh, stupid. My life is over.
When's the first time that you suspected that he wasn't real?
I don't remember specific, but I remember not knowing, or I remember knowing that feeling like he wasn't. See, I can't even say it.
It's hard, right? So here's
because I have 4 kids.
Here's an interesting thing. I remember. I was talking words. I was probably 8 years old, and I got a bike for Christmas from Santa Claus. And I remember me and Casey used to go in the backyard, and we'd go play. We lived in Phoenix, Arizona, and there was this alleyway. We'd go in the back alleyway and like ride our bikes and play back there. And after Christmas, it was like a couple days after Christmas, we went in the back alleyway, and there was the giant box for the bike that I got from Santa Claus.
Oh, no.
And I was like 8 years old, and I was like, wait a minute. why would Santa Claus leave the box in the alleyway? And I remember asking my mom and dad, like, why is the box for my bike in the back alleyway? I thought like Santa made those and like, brought him on his sleigh. And they're like, well, Santa has to throw his trash away somehow. You know what I mean? And they try to come up for a lie. So that was the first time where I was like, wait a minute. This doesn't make sense. This doesn't make sense. Anyways, when's the first time that you suspected? Do you have an experience like that?
I don't, but I remember knowing that he wasn't and still being like, oh, Santa's Claus, like playing
you play along
because
with
it's
it.
magical. It's fun to believe.
That's true. I wonder, how long, kids are just like, oh yeah, Santa, but in their minds are like, this isn't, I know mom and dad.
If you're just like, that's a bunch of crap, who cares? That's just like,
it's not as fun.
It's no fun.
So, me and Claude have gotten this discussion where she's like, no, we got to keep that magic alive. But, a lot of people have raised the question. It's like, well, okay, you teach kids about Jesus and then you teach kids about Santa.
Right.
And then you tell them that Santa's not real. So it's like, well, what about Jesus? Is he fake too? You know what I mean? So there's that line of thinking where it's like, well, this person that these two people you've never seen before and that you believe in, one of them, it's like, I feel like it's almost unhealthy to teach kids about Santa Claus because of that.
I've heard of some parents feeling that way, but I don't, because I never felt like it was a bad thing. Like when I knew he wasn't, I still felt the magic of it, the excitement of it. And I was never like resentful. But that's a good question. As parents, do you ever get jealous of Santa getting credit for giving awesome gifts?
Yes. Well,
I do.
There's some
and there's
gifts.
been some instances where I've been like, yeah, when I got you that last year for Christmas, he's like, you didn't get me that. Santa got me that. And I was like, oh yeah, I forgot who I was.
There's been specific times where I've found something for the kids that I was excited to get them, and I purposely said that Santa's not giving them this. I'm giving them this. Like I will wrap it up because I'm like, I'm not putting that out and giving Santa the credit because I think it's such a great gift that I don't want them to think Santa gave it to him. I wanted it to be like, from Shay, your dad, I got you this. But there's been specific gifts that I remember not putting out from Santa because I thought I want him to know that I got him that.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because I thought it was such a cool toy and they would like be so excited about it.
Right.
But yeah, that's a good question because Santa gets all the credit for
what
giving
about
the
the
awesome
Tooth
gifts.
Fairy? Tooth Fairy, we've had some pretty. She's always late. Let's just be honest.
Princess Tara just
The
lost
Tooth Fairy's
a tooth.
always late. A
and
couple days.
Put a tooth under her pillow with the bag and woke up the next morning and the Tooth Fairy did not come.
I don't know.
Mommy
She
and
was
Daddy
out partying or something. Stupid Tooth Fairy.
Then we start lying to our children like, oh, well then Centaured's like, oh, she probably couldn't get into it because we got put those deadbolts.
in the mailbox or something.
We just put these big deadbolts on the doors because Rocktard had climbed out on the balcony recently
Oh, my
and was
goodness.
like climbing up on the banister.
It's a heart attack.
And it's like a far drop, so we got these deadbolts put in place. So Centaured's like, maybe she couldn't get in our house because of the deadbolts. So we're like, maybe it's in the mailbox. Maybe she put it in the mailbox. So then we gonna go try to slip a $5 bill on the mailbox.
Well, and then Princess Tard's like, you know what? I think the Tooth Fairy's a guy. And I'm like, you do? And she goes, yeah, like on that movie, The Tooth Fairy. I think he's a guy.
Oh,
like,
really?
Okay.
Is that with The Rock?
Yeah, with The Rock.
That's hilarious.
I just think it's funny.
Okay, so next question. How do you explain death to a child?
We're really packing a lot into one
Yeah.
podcast, aren't we? I feel like these topics could all
Be like
go a
single
long
podcast
ways, yeah.
topics. Yeah. Well, we've recently dealt with that, with Malachi dying. My grandpa Eugene died a couple years ago where the kids went to that funeral. And then just recently, my uncle died. And, we went to the funeral. They saw him in the casket. Baby Tard wanted to touch him, which was interesting.
Yeah.
She said, can I touch him? And so Mommy Tard was holding her, and she just was
And I explained to her
touching his
before, like
forehead.
his heart's not beating, so his skin is cold, so she wasn't like, oh my gosh, because it's weird, it's different.
So that's kind of like just part of our belief system that we die. Death isn't a big sad thing. I mean, it's sad in the fact that you miss that person, but we believe and we teach our children very actively, when we read scriptures at night before we go to bed, at church every Sunday, we believe that we're on this timeline of where we lived before we came to this earth. We lived just like we are now. We didn't have bodies, but we were spirit people that lived with our Heavenly Father before we came to this earth. Then we came to this earth. We got bodies. Now we're here on this earth to gain experience, to be tested and to obey the commandments, and then we will die.
And to gain knowledge.
To gain knowledge and, to create these families, and that is just part of the process, that we'll die, and that it's okay because then we live after we die, and that we'll have these same relationships, and that, our families will exist after, the skin goes cold. And so that's something that, we talk to them a lot about, and I think they understand it, Baby Tard prayed the other night. That was random. Was that last night? She prayed that Grandpa Eugene would come back to life.
Oh, yeah.
She
it was
said,
very interesting.
And please bless that Grandpa Eugene will come back to life. She doesn't quite understand it.
I think it's a process. Do we all quite understand it? I think,
right.
Even when I lost my mom at a young age, I remember feeling like, this is so weird. Everybody's telling me, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm like, why are they all sorry? They didn't do anything. And just feeling like this is a really weird thing, even though it was sort of expected to happen. And I had been prepped before, I guess. I've had a lot of conversations with my dad and with trusted other adults in my life about it. But it's just something that you kind of, it's a process. You learn about little by little. And when it's close to you, you learn a little bit more, and you have to go through the grieving process. And I think it's just a healthy thing. I don't think we should be afraid to talk to our kids about serious issues. Because death is a serious thing, and most of us, I think, are afraid to talk about it because we don't understand it completely. But
I'll tell you what.
Talk about what you know and what you...
Life flies, man. It really does. And this is like kind of a cliche with older people, like, man, I can't believe how fast time goes. And, as young people that are watching the show, you're probably like, a month seems like eternity. But just seeing my uncle in that coffin, it made me realize, like, I'm really growing up. Like, to see these people that were a huge impact in my life, to start seeing them in coffins, you realize that life is very short, considerably, when you think about it. Like, time flies by. I can't believe that, we have 4 kids. It really speeds by. And those moments will come, mark my words, where somebody close to you will die, or a dog dies. And you have to ask yourself those questions, like, what really matters in my life? Because a lot of times when you get into the day-to-day stuff, and it's just like, you don't think about that stuff. But when somebody dies that means something to you, you have to ask yourself that question, like, where did that person go? Because they were here, and all of a sudden they're not here anymore. So you have to, ask yourself those hard questions, and really kind of delve inside yourself and to see what you believe and what you feel. And I feel like it's, not something that you should be afraid of. And that's, why I'm very happy about the beliefs that we have, that, we do live on after.
Right.
And I don't know that for sure. Let me just be honest. Like, I've never seen God. I've never seen Jesus. I've never seen any of my relatives that have passed on. But those are the beliefs that we have from, scriptures, and from the feelings that we get when we read about those things. And,
And when we experience them. I've had experiences after my mom passed on that I really felt her with me. And some could debate that that's, you were just feeling that way because you needed to feel that way at that moment. But I choose to believe it a different way. I really feel like she lives on, and I think you just have to trust in what you believe. And if you don't believe that they live on, then you have to, find some type of closure with that and be okay with that, because we obviously have to continue living on here.
And then you get into the debate whether God exists or whether we live on after. And, if we don't, then it won't matter, because we'll just be worm food, right? And then the debate won't even be there. But I'd like to think that we do.
I think the bottom line is,
I don't want to think this is over.
I don't think it's safe to try to cover up these things from your kids or hide them. Try to be as open as possible. And, I think if the kids did come to me and be like, Mom, is Santa Claus real? I would probably be like, well, what do you think?
Because you don't want to lose it. That's the truth, though, is just be open and honest with your kids, and, be honest with yourself. Ask yourself those questions, and be able to rise above what everybody else says, or what you hear in the news, or even, what you hear at church. Be able to think for yourself.
Yeah.
But use your feelings to determine those things. Like, listen to, that still small voice, or listen to your heart, or whatever the cliche is. You got to ask yourself those questions, and you got to think about that. That's something that's part of life. And I think, everybody does at some point or another.
And I think if that's something that you haven't really come to terms with yourself, like talking about death with your kids, or if you're not comfortable talking about sex with your kids, just realize that that's okay too. And to be able to say to your kids, you know what, I don't know what happens.
Right.
But this is how I feel, and I understand that you're sad too. And just being able to express your feelings, even if you don't know if they're, whatever feelings they are,
Communicate,
Communicate.
Let those feelings out. And that's, I think that is most important. And that's one thing to close this up. That's one thing I told Sentart about when he asked if we'll ever get a divorce. And I said, no, because me and your mom communicate. We talk and we listen to each other's feelings. And that's so important to, get all that stuff out there. Because a lot of times fights happen over what's really not the root of the issue. You know what I'm saying? You're fighting about something that's not really the problem. Anyways, thanks for joining us on this weird podcast of sex, death, and Santa Claus.
Moment parent talk.
Do you think Santa Claus has sex?
Oh my goodness! Yay!
Mrs. Santa. Join us next time.
Tell us what you think in the comments. We'd like to hear about it.
Yeah, we'll do a follow-up sex, death, and podcast.
Yes,
Santa.
Sex,
All
death,
right.
and Santa podcast.
Cut it.
Later.